We're going to be talking spiritual maturity. Wait. Before you turn this podcast off, stick around and give us a shot, okay? Give us a shot at the spiritual maturity thing. Because when we say, are you spiritually mature, I think everybody probably thinks that they're more spiritually mature probably than they actually are.
I don't know. The first thing I pictured was a very old pastor standing in a pulpit with his, long flowing robe, that he's super spiritually mature, and that I'm not.
Like an Oxford professor, R.T. Kendall, sitting in his study.
Right. I was thinking of a teenager who, struggles to do the basics of life and thinks they're very mature.
Yeah.
Able to make all decisions.
Oh. It's the peril of raising teenagers?
No,
Yes.
I was just saying, I was just thinking of that. There's no
Right.
there's no association to anything in my life.
I think what you're hitting on is I don't think we have a clue where we are spiritually mature.
Right,
I mean, I think it would be hard to assess that.
Yes. Is there a test you take?
Yeah.
Or,
Right,
is
Am I a C student?
Enneagram? Can
Yeah.
you figure it out? Because we like to do all those kinds of things. We like to see where we are spiritually.
And I don't think spiritual maturity, I talk about the, old white pastor that with the long white hair, that I don't think that he is the knowledgeable one. It's not about, spiritual maturity is not about knowledge. It's about behavior. I think it is in the action of our lives that shows our spiritual maturity. So, for instance, the fruit. Are we producing fruit? If so, there's probably more spiritual maturity. Are we demonstrating the fruits of the Spirit? Are we demonstrating wisdom? Are we, is our behavior the overflow of our spiritual condition?
Yeah.
You don't agree? I can see it in your face.
I don't know. Well, it's not that I disagree. I think we have to be careful, because I think the church has had people who behave the right way who are not spiritually mature.
Yeah.
And that shows itself when the heat is turned up in their lives and they've done all these wonderful things. But when the rubber meets the road, they don't have roots, and they quickly abandon their faith, leave the church, and you never hear from them again. So I just don't want to make the whole of the discussion about behavior, because I honestly, there have been times in my life where I've behaved the right way and my heart has been so far away from it that that's not even funny. So I just don't want to make that overarching assumption that just because the behavior is right means the heart is right. Because I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the path of spiritual maturity is never ending. And I think it doesn't do, for me, the only guidepost I have is asking myself, am I seeking God more today than I did last year or even last month? Where am I along my particular path with regard to my true heart seeking to honor God, seeking to connect with God?
Yeah. And I think when I think about what spiritual maturity looks like, we've all kind of struck at that, but I went to Psalm 1, and Psalm 1 says, the verse 3 starts, "He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so." It goes on there. But I have that image in my mind of a tree planted by streams of living water, where the roots go down deep and
getting nourished.
Yeah. And I think I have had the privilege of walking with a couple of people that I know in the history of my life that have been through tremendously difficult times and who have held on to their faith, sometimes just by the skin of their teeth, but have held on to their faith and grown to know God better through those struggles and trials. And I see a maturity in them that I want to not necessarily emulate, but I want to grow from knowing them and being able to under. But it's not been, and this is a place for discussion. It's not been without great heartache that they've gotten there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, you're making me think of a truth that connects to a spiritual maturity, and it's the same understanding of building muscle in your body. You cannot build muscle in your body without resistance. Resistance is what breaks down the muscle for it to then grow stronger. And the same is true in our spiritual lives. When we run up against resistance and we realize our need for God to get through it and then to help us grow stronger, that's how it happens. I don't think growth happens without resistance.
So true. So true. I, also look to Hebrews 5, where it says solid food is for the mature. We think about raising kids and having babies, and they can't eat solid food when they're first born. And they have to grow into that. And we think about that. And then Ephesians 4 talks about we may no longer be children tossed to and fro. Right. You think about life and how it tosses us, and we have to hold on to our faith. I think it's a growth process. You're right. It never does end until we see Jesus face to face. But I want us to kind of think about, because I think we can talk spiritual maturity all day long. And this is something that's kind of come to me kind of in the back door of my life recently. Y'all know me. I'm a creative. And so structure is not my thing. But I actually, in the last, 5 years or so, have been on this journey where I read this book, and the guy basically said, creatives always say they don't need any structure, but actually the opposite is true. The more structure a creative has, the more free they feel to create. And I was like, And so I've been testing that strategy throughout my life. And where I want to go with that is this, is that the structure doesn't happen automatically. Like when I show up for work every day, I've got the same 8-9 hours, whatever work day looks like for you. We all got the same amount of time. It looks totally different, right? Because each of us have different job responsibilities. Well, if I come in with, I'm just going to see what happens starting at 8 o'clock. We all know how those days go. You get pulled into meetings that you have no business being in. You have to be intentional about how you spend your time. And so I've been on this journey to kind of build in things that will help me be more creative. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because spiritually, I've realized I have always said, I want to be more spiritually mature. I want to grow. I want to do all the things. And then I realized, oh my goodness, you know what? This is not going to happen on its own. I've got to be intentional about putting some things in my life, putting some things in place that are contributing to my spiritual growth. And it's not playing Candy Crush.
Right, yeah.
Like when that back in the heyday, when that was the big game, everybody played Candy Crush. I would look at how much time I spent playing Candy Crush, and I'm like, I can no longer say that I don't have time to read my Bible because I spent 48 minutes yesterday playing Candy Crush.
Well, and along those lines, isn't part of spiritual maturity growing to look like Jesus? And that's part of what we're wanting to do. And what did Jesus do? I mean, first of all, he didn't play Candy Crush. Second of all,
he might have if he had.
I don't know.
Good question.
He'd been good at it.
Manna Crush.
He was very intentional in what he did.
Yeah.
He intentionally would leave a place because he needed to move on to the next one. He was very intentional in going and stopping and praying. He was very intentional in going, even as a 12-year-old boy, he was intentional in going to his father's house to hear the scroll read. He was very intentional with all he did. So he's our model, and we're to grow to look like him. So intentionality really is the key.
Absolutely. And that phrase, we've heard it, we've said it before, you don't drift toward holiness.
Yeah.
You don't. If you're not paddling, you're going to be drifting toward the world and Candy Crush and all of those things. But
please don't write me and tell me Candy Crush. I know Candy Crush is not bad.
I never played it. I don't know. I don't do the video games, but I do watch videos.
Okay.
So, sorry.
Well, let's talk about social media, because I think it's easy to get sucked into the Facebook algorithms and the scrolling and the endless.
They know how to get you.
My daughter, y'all, she sends me like 4 million Instagram videos a day, and they're just stupid, funny stuff.
Silly things.
But before you know it, you've scrolled through
Yes.
20 minutes of that, and then you're like, oh my word, what in the world? So I think what I want you to hear is not condemnation. If you play Candy Crush or Wordle or whatever your game is, that's fine. You can play games. But I will say, if you want to spiritually mature, you're not going to just do that because it's your nature. It's not your nature. We still have this sinful nature that wants to feed the flesh, which entertainment and those things aren't bad, but they are feeding the flesh.
Yeah.
And they're not building into you spiritually. And I mean, I'm just going to go right here and say this because,
Because you can.
there ain't nobody who's going to stop me, at least right now. But a lot of times when we sit in front of the television and just binge watch programs, they're not the kind of stuff that is building into us spiritually. And B,
Never.
that's not a good way to spend your time, especially if you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. We've all been through that. And the feeding of the flesh when I am hungry, angry, lonely, or tired never ends well, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, and maybe you're different, maybe you can handle it, but I have noticed, like, that has got to be something that I got to put a stop to because that begins to form our worldview.
Yeah.
That is how issues are pressed onto us through programming that we allow into our homes, and that's the message our children. I mean, it all kind of works together. So what is it you're spending? And I am just as guilty about watching college football on Saturdays. I can sit down and watch college football all stinking day long. Same thing with basketball. I can watch it all day long. Is that a bad thing? No. But what am I doing to invest in myself spiritually? If I say I want to grow spiritually but have not built things in to invest into my spiritual life, then I don't really want to grow spiritually. That's where the problem is.
Yeah. I think one of the other tools is to put down the technology. For me, I do not like reading my Bible on my phone. If I want to actually, or devotionals,
Study.
I want to hold a book.
Yeah.
I want to hold a devotional. I want to hold the Bible because there's no other distractions. If I open that phone and I go to read a devotional on my phone, I'm going to first go to Facebook, or I'm going to first go and,
Check emails.
do something that's not going to actually ever get me there. And it's just going to be a distraction.
Right.
15 minutes later, I go, oh, I've got 5 minutes for the Lord. I guess I need to, open that
box,
Bible
yeah.
app. Whereas if I sit down with my actual Bible, it's a game changer for me.
Yeah.
Good.
And that's different for everybody. You might be able to, silence all your notifications and be able to do that just fine. And for convenience, sometimes I do read the Bible on my phone just because I have it with me more so than not. But you got to find what works for you and what distracts you too. I think it's equally as important to know what distracts you because, and y'all, I've said this before, but it's so totally true. If I put my phone on grayscale, if I turn the color off and just do black and white, I do not pick up my phone as much. You see a sharp decline in my screen time. I know that sounds really stupid and simple, but here is what I'll tell you. It works for me. And so if I spend less time looking at my phone, that's a win.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things we can do for spiritual maturity is to make sure we are active in a body of Christ. If we are active in the church, if we have another group of believers, Titus 2 says older women are to pour into younger women to teach them how to be better believers. As older women, we're supposed to pour into the younger women. We are to have older women pour into us. That's how we grow spiritually in addition to letting the Lord do the work. And so if we are wanting to grow spiritually and be more spiritually mature, we need to have models and role models around us who are spiritually mature.
Yep.
Okay, I got to ask.
Okay.
I got to stop the presses and ask this because we've talked about this before, the need for the accountability, the need for being poured into or pouring into. I personally struggle to figure out how to do that. And I wondered if you guys might talk about how you do that, because I think there are other people like me who don't know how to find an accountability partner or to find a woman to pour into me or someone for me to pour into if I have anything to pour.
Yeah.
But how do you do it?
I mean, I will say it started for me with my church offered a women's Bible study, and I started there.
Okay.
So I started going to women's Bible study. When you do that, just by being in a larger group, you kind of connect with more people on some level than you do with others.
Okay.
That led me to join a life group at our church.
Okay.
Life group is a smaller group of people that may or may not be. I've been in intergenerational life groups. Is that what you call it? Multi-generational. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Multi-generational life groups with people of all ages. I've been in married life groups when I was married. I've been in single life groups. I've been in all different kinds. And there are naturally people that you're going to gravitate towards because your personalities mesh. You know, they're going to be some of those natural things to happen. But that started me on a journey where I went from that Bible study. I started memorizing scripture. We memorized the first chapter of James in that Bible study. And then I went on to joining a life group, which is more doing life together, not just doing a Bible study, but after the 6 weeks or whatever's over, you continue with these same people and develop deeper relationships. And from there, I developed one of my closest friends that I have to this day. And I also felt like God wanted me to lead a small group, life group. And so I started doing that. So it was progression. It was one of those
over quite a while.
Over time. I'm going to say over the last 15 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say for me, it started, I joined the choir at church. And I just stood after choir and started yapping with some of the older ladies in our church because yapping is what I do best. And so we just sat there, and I found one I really liked. She was the one with the big smile. And I started talking with her, and we just kept walking to the car, and we talked further, and then we didn't want to talk. We didn't want to leave the conversation.
Yeah.
And then we just developed a friendship. And you could do that. You don't have to join the choir. You could do that by joining the mission team, or something that's a regular group of people that you're going to see on a regular basis, and then just find an older, more spiritually wise woman that you can look at and go, I want to get to know her better, and then see what the Lord does with it. I don't think it has to be a formal program.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be necessarily a, hey, would you pour into me spiritually? It's just finding somebody that you can look at and go, I think she's spiritually wise. She seems to have it all together. The fruit of her life is spiritual fruit. She's demonstrating the fruits of the Spirit. She seems to be wise. She seems to have spiritual, she just seems to be spiritually mature.
Yeah.
So I want to get to know her better.
So in both of those cases, you guys are talking about taking a step. And I know that's the thing that stopped me, is not taking the step to put myself into a ministry or a group, a Bible study or something. So
yeah. And I will say this, it doesn't always have to be in a formal church setting. I know some of the best conversations and people that I feel like I have poured into who I ended up in a more formal spiritual relationship with, whereas we went to a Bible study together or something like that, is a lot of times when I was at my kids' functions, it was the same parents showing up at the same place.
Church functions or regular functions?
Dance,
okay.
Or band or all those things.
Okay.
I would see the same people showing up, and we, developed friendships based on that. Hey, your kid plays the tuba, and those kinds of things. And you just start talking to people. It's amazing the things that'll come up in conversation. We just take the time to listen to people, and you don't necessarily have to share the Roman road or the 4 spiritual laws, anything like that. But if people confide in you and tell you things, you have an opportunity to speak into them spiritually, and they will come to you after that. If they've developed that relationship, when they see that in you, they will come to you and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you pray for me? People will ask for prayer that don't have any spiritual, when they get in a crisis, they'll ask for prayer when they don't have any spiritual, even affiliation. They're willing to ask for prayer. And that's because most people are more open to talk about God when they're in some sort of crisis. And that's when God provides us the opportunity to step in and say, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'll pray for you, and I want you to know this truth about God, but He loves you and wants what's best for you, So I don't think it necessarily has to be in a church. I think a church is an easier place for a believer to get plugged in. But sometimes that's scary too, especially if you've had I come from a background where I got hurt in church, and so for a time period, I kind of stayed back and did not engage. but I will say it was in those years of my life, I just felt like something was missing. It wasn't that I felt like I'd lost my salvation or I wasn't a Christian. It just, there was something, and I don't really know that I could give words to it then, but there was just something of my experience that felt still disconnected. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that both of us have said too is that it comes down to getting into a small group of people, that our churches have all gotten so big
Yeah.
that it's easy to get lost. It's easy to come into a Sunday service once a week, not see anybody that you recognize, say hello to 2 or 3 people you do recognize, and then sneak out the door without ever actually really engaging with another person who can pour into you spiritually. And I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
And it's, I think we can all get that way, especially the larger our churches get.
And the more hurt we are. Like, I know for sure that I had really struggled with connecting with people and being part of a community, of a small group after the death of my dad, because I kind of got my feelings hurt, and my tendency was to move further away instead of move further in.
Yeah.
But I knew I needed to move further in, but I didn't want to. I didn't. I just wanted to kind of go in, listen to church, and then run out the door. But I feel like kind of part of this conversation is reminding me that I think I need to move closer in instead of further out.
Yeah. And I will say this, and I tell my girls in my small group, nothing grows in isolation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth of it. And,
Except for sin.
well, that's true. The thing about it, too, is when we isolate, that's exactly where the enemy wants us. And that's exactly when the lies get louder. And when you don't want to go to church, that's exactly when you need to be in church. Because that voice in your head is not the one who loves you and cares for you. That's the enemy going, you don't need to go hang out with all those people. They're bigger sinners than you are, and they probably are. But you isolating yourself, think of it as a battle.
Yeah.
If an army is coming against you, the last place you want to be is by yourself.
True.
You want to be surrounded by other people who have the same uniform on that you do, right? And if you get isolated, you're probably not going to make it. That's been the case for me. The times in my life where I've isolated, the devil has come in with a vengeance and attacked me in those places. And I praise God. And I know it was probably the prayers of my grandmother that jerked me out of some places that I could have been very easily and was in some areas of sin in my life that, my goodness gracious, I never thought I'd find myself there, but there I was.
Yeah.
And it's because I had completely isolated. I tell my girls all the time, like, if you don't do your homework for Bible study, or if you didn't come to church that day, still come to Life Group, because I want them to know this is a place where you don't have to get it all right. I think we make that assumption that, we got to have all the blanks filled in and the boxes checked, and we got to have perfect attendance.
Or even I got to be happy.
Yeah. That's what Life Group's all about.
Yeah.
Some of our best Life Group times together now is when somebody's really struggling and they're honest enough to raise their hand and say, hey, can y'all pray for me? Those are some of the best Life Groups. When we don't even get to the lesson. So I would encourage you to engage in that, because I know that is hard and it's a painful place, and sometimes you feel like you're just not ready for that. But I at least in my life, that has spelled danger for me.
Yep. Yeah. And that's part of spiritual maturity.
Yeah.
Going to the right place.
For the right things.
For the right things.
Yeah. And the last question, and this was kind of a more question for us to kind of ponder in the days ahead, and as you finish up listening to this episode, when will you decide that you have time to work on your life with God?
Let's not wait until we're starving.
No. The time to eat is not when you're starving. Right?
Yeah.
Little
Time is
meals all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The time is now. Yeah. And
actually, I heard, I was on Facebook earlier today, and a friend of mine from college died.
Oh, no.
I don't know how. I don't know what happened. We weren't super close, but we were friends in school. We were in the theater program together, and her daughter posted, Kat died. Her name, Catherine. She died. And so it's a reminder that we don't know what tomorrow brings. Not one of us knows what tomorrow will bring. And so now is the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you've watched the news recently or not, but things are getting worse, not better. And it's more important now than ever before for us to know what we believe, know how to battle effectively, and know how to take more people with us. I have my favorite T-shirt right now is "Make Heaven Crowded."
Love it.
Love that shirt, and I want to make sure that you and your family members and your extended family, I see there in heaven.
And that's a sign of spiritual maturity, when you want people to come with you.
Yep.
Yeah, and we want that desperately for you. Hey, if you don't know Jesus and you want to get to know him right now, you can text the word Jesus to this phone number. What's going to happen is I'm going to send you Billy Graham's Steps to Peace with God. Nobody's going to reach out to you, show up on your porch, none of that. You'll just get a simple way that you can start taking steps towards God right now. So just text the word Jesus, that's it, nothing else, to 800-293-1069. Just the word Jesus to 800-293-1069. I'll be glad to send that to you. And then email us and let us know if you took that first step in your relationship with God today. That would thrill us to death. We're going to be praying for you. We'd love to hear from you. girltalk@thelightfm.org is our email address if you want to get in touch. Get in touch on the Facebook pages. We'd love to hear from you. And thanks again for being here today. We always love it when you show up, and we're going to be saving you a seat next time we gather around these microphones for the next Girl Talk podcast.